Afternoon, thanks for joining us this afternoon. First item on the work session is the Evergreen Solutions Wage Study. Don, Kevin DeHaven, and guest.
Good afternoon. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our consultant to introduce herself and provide you with information on the wage study.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Nancy Berkeley with Evergreen Solutions. Just a little bit as a reminder of Evergreen Solutions, we're based in Tallahassee, Florida, and we're a national public sector consulting firm. Happy to be here this evening presenting the results of our study, which was a compensation study for your city. So on the agenda, I'm just going to talk briefly about the study process, what we call current conditions, an assessment of what we call current conditions. I'll explain that. We reviewed briefly your compensation philosophy, or our understanding of your compensation philosophy. The compensation review, the fact that we conducted a salary survey, and that we made some revisions to the pay plan and recommendations for implementation of that new pay plan, a revised pay plan, and just a couple of additional recommendations. So again, what we've completed is this assessment of the conditions of the, again, a non-union pay system. This is what we were focused on, or what we were asked, obviously, really to focus on in this study. We looked at the city's compensation philosophy, a few key elements. You'll see that here in another slide in a few minutes. Key elements of a compensation philosophy, which are certainly important to any organization because it guides things like where you want to be in the market from a labor standpoint, et cetera. And then we conducted a salary survey for that, what we call external equity. So we surveyed positions, non-union and union, and a few union classifications to find out what the market was paying for those classifications. And then from the results, we revised the non-union, or made recommendations, I should say. We're making recommendations to revise the non-union compensation structure. I should mention on bullet 3, where I'm talking about conducting the external equity analysis. My terminology here, I call this a compensation-only study, meaning there are generally two types, again, if you kind of just throw it out like that, of compensation studies, what I call a full compensation and class study, comp and class study, which is normally looking at very individual, asking employees to complete some kind of job assessment tool or something of that nature, so you get that information as well. And then there's what I call comp studies only, where you're not looking that in depth because you're not asking employees to complete something for you. In the classification side, you're looking at the current job descriptions and surveying positions. So I call that a comp-only study. So we were asked to do a comp-only study. That's what this is, just for a little bit of clarification there, hopefully. Again, we developed options, and we're recommending the option that we would recommend. We developed different options for implementation. Implementation meaning taking current employee salaries and placing them in that new revised plan. So I'll show you what that option is that we're recommending, and estimated the annualized salary cost to implement, and then prepared and provided a report of all the study findings and recommendations. Oops. A little too fast there. I'm sorry. Okay, so reviewing the current conditions, again, this is just looking at the non-union pay structure. It's just something we do. We want to look and see what kind of structure you currently have. It's a step-based structure, as I'm sure you're very aware, with specific 21 pay grades, 14 steps in those pay grades. For at the time we took the snapshot in time, it was 130 non-union employees. We also look at some data, statistical data of where current employee salaries are within that structure. And at a high level, as you can see here, 80.3% of the salaries were above the midpoint of that current structure. And 63 were in the fourth quartile. That's a fairly significant amount, more than we sometimes typically see. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here when we get a minute. So again, a large percentage of them, you know, over in the top portion of that pay structure. Could be for various reasons. I think we know why, but we'll get to that. Compensation philosophy. These four little elements here, primarily what we needed to understand when we were conducting the study so we could do the comparisons of the market data at the market position that you wanted to be at, which is competitive. Pay practices, we want to understand that, you know, briefly because those can impact pay or things that are going on in your labor world as well. People can have different, organizations can have different pay practices, new hire salary practices, promotion practices, et cetera, that impact an organization. Again, generally that, you know, they are equitable pay practice, typical, I'd say, nothing that we needed to be extremely, you know, concerned with or whatever, aware of here. That you wanted to continue with the same pay plan design of a step-based plan for non-union positions. Again, options are step-based, open range, or some hybrid thereof. But that was an important thing for us to know. So when we make the recommendations, we're recommending, again, another step-based plan because that's what you asked us to do. And that your pay increase methods are generally time-based, tenure, step-based. For the compensation review or the salary survey, we collected salary range data from the 13 peers you see here. We actually collected a little bit more data, but we were combing through the market peers. We wanted to keep the market peers to what we thought was the most reasonable, which is really a more competitive, if you will, reasonably where employees could probably travel to without having to relocate. That's generally a competitive peers. You can have comparator peers as well outside of that range if need be, but generally this seemed to be the most appropriate. So this is the list of 13 peers from which we actually collected data to gain the results for 36 benchmark non-union classifications. We surveyed a few more than that, but we didn't. If we don't get enough responses, data for some of them, we don't include them in the results because like one data point is not relevant, if you will, for example. And we also surveyed 10 union classifications. So as you can see there too, the average number of matches for the classifications was 5.7. And again, not all we didn't have matches for all, so. And we removed those. But the only ones that we're reporting are the 36. When, of course, we have the detail for each of those 36 classifications. What you see here is together, if you look at on the average then, all of those together, the pay structure, we would generally say the pay structure is what I would call lagging the market at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum. Now again, we're using step 7 as the midpoint, but if you look here, it's 22% behind the market, what we found in the market, 18.2 at the midpoint and 15.8 at the maximum. I will say that's a fairly significant amount of differential that we typically see. We do studies all the time, of course, so we see differentials, and that's a little surprising, but I understand. I don't think there's been some change in the structure for some time. So, got a point here. Midpoint is typically where any employee of a competitive structure, I should underline, of a competitive structure, where any employee would expect to have their pay or hope to have their pay if they're performing proficiently and satisfactorily. So it's kind of where generally most comp people would call the market, about midpoint. For the 10 union classifications that we surveyed, again, averaging them all together, for those, they were behind 6.6 at the minimum, 1.7 at the midpoint, and 11.6 at the maximum. Again, doesn't indicate all were that same amount or what have you, so we have the detail. So what did we do then? We are suggesting that the non-union pay structure, and this just shows, if you will, step 1 and 14, so it's kind of showing the minimum and the maximum here, that we increased the whole structure by 7% because it was significantly behind. Additionally, what you don't see here is we regraded, if you will. We individually looked at the classifications and said, did some need to change some grades, and some did. So it's not just moving things over by 7%. We're looking at the individual classifications, saying, do they need a pay grade change? And many did. But we kept the structure the same, the design of it the same, step base, how many grades, the range spreads, and the percent of the adjustments. Nothing wrong with that design, so just kept that same design. With implementation, what we're recommending is what we call closest step up, meaning take after we've done this and said with that new pay plan, where are the current employees' salaries, take their salary and say they need to be on a step now that we've changed that pay plan. So place them on a step, not a step below where they're whatever, but the closest step up. So that means that some of the employees would get an adjustment. It's not that they're getting an adjustment for a reason other than the fact that because to put them in that new plan that's moved 7% and some regrading, they need to be placed on a step to do so. And we need to, they require a step, a little bit of an adjustment. So that's for the 130 non-union employees, on the average 1.6% salary adjustment at an annualized cost of $138,698. So one of the results of this would be that the new plan would give employees who are currently, and there were a fairly significant number, percentage number, 26, I believe, I'd have to look for certain, so of employees who were approaching that maximum before that other plan, probably because it wasn't at as a competitive position as it needed to be. So this allows some room for salary growth opportunity for those employees too. So it helps with that. And again, mention here that the cost estimates are salary only, not including benefits. And then from additional recommendations, we would suggest, really as we do with any client, that you continue to do these studies, that the comp study, like every 3 to 5 years, definitely probably consider doing what we would call that what I call that full compensation and classification study at least every 5 years. So, and we have some clients, I have some clients that have been with the firm for 6 years who do that pretty regularly, keep on track of a full comp and class, and then what I call updates, the compensation studies. So there isn't as much that you have to do at that time because you're staying a little bit more current with the market. That's what I have. Questions?
Do you have a money tree?
So again, the closest step up, basically that's the easy way to make the adjustment is to just move everybody to the next step.
It's just moving them, it's taking wherever their salary is, and because we move that structure, they now don't fall on a step. You have to put them on a step. So it's putting them on the closest step up, because we don't want to put them
So if you look at the
behind.
wage table,
Yeah.
it has increased by 7% as a result of the study, which I think Nancy will tell you is a really conservative number. And so now you take that new wage scale, you figure out where people are on that step. They may have been at step 14, and now they may be at 12, but that will be the closest as a result of that.
You just have to get their salaries on a step,
Right.
basically. So, but yes, and thank you, yeah, the 7%, again, going back to that other slide where we did a relatively conservative adjustment to the pay scale. Just,
So when
I
you,
like to be conservative more than not. Go ahead.
when you say you base this on 13 peers within, we'll call it the regional market, and I look at the 13 peers, did you get a salary classification from each of those peer locations for each of the positions evaluated?
Not necessarily. So I believe you're asking, did we get no? And that's why, so it says like the average number of matches is 5.7. So some may have been 9, some may have been 7, some may have been what have you. So is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
It varies, yes,
And
it's
so-
always varies.
And I guess the curiosity that I would have, and let's say let's say for any one position, let's say that on that average, one of them was 5, and it happened to include Frederick, Carroll, and Annapolis, and, Thurmont and one other, collectively, which make up an average median household income in those jurisdictions, on average of about $90,000. Now, the median household income in the city of Hagerstown, on average, is $38,000. I'm trying to equate the percentage adjustment recommendations to the fact that our citizens, 20,000 households in this community, that on average, a household brings in about $38,000. In fact, except for about 2 of the peers, we are lower than the other 11 that are utilized, and in some cases, and let's take Washington County, which is at $58,000, so it's almost double. As soon as you step across the city line, it's almost double. So I understand the dynamics of that employee mobility as it applies to that regional, pool of employee base, but I'm not certain how you can marry the two issues where you say we want to be competitive, but we're comparing ourselves to jurisdictions that have the taxable income capability that is on average 3 times our household income to draw from, and household property value to draw from, and still be able to meet those numbers, because that's sort of part of that reality that we face. At what point, if any, does that factor into an evaluation such as this? Do you take into account at all the differentiation between those jurisdictions' median household incomes and property values and house sales, and what they are in the jurisdiction, in this case, the city of Hagerstown, that's being evaluated?
So I'm going to say this, and I think this is where, and we had some discussion, I did with the city, about the peers and what have you. So it comes down to, and I have this conversation periodically with them, with organizations. Who do you compete with? Can they go work there, regardless of whether you're paying or can pay those wages or not? That's your, okay? And do you want to be, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and again, competitive with those that may be able to pay more?
And for us, those equates to just about everybody around us. I mean, that's who the those are. I mean,
And-
pretty much everyone in our surrounding 30 to 50 mile radius is not just more competitive, but exponentially more competitive in their capability to draw employees at a rate that frankly has 3 times on average, 3 times the income, taxable income assessments, the property value assessments to draw on. And I get it, and I think that's part of the rub I have, sitting in the seat, because I have to look at it and say, okay, and I don't mean this as a slight at all to your evaluation, to the employees at all, but the reality is this, 80% of the folks that we employ live outside of the city, you know what I mean? And they're working at clearly a rate that is less competitive than those jurisdictions that they can go and find employment elsewhere. But our numbers, I mean, our property tax evaluation, our assessments have went down, 11 out of the last 13 years? And those are the dynamics that we deal with in our attempt to level that playing field.
We did have discussions early on about whether or not we wanted to level the data. You know, sitting in my seat, it doesn't matter whether you adjust for the cost of living or not. The reality is what the reality is.
I get that.
And we might as well know it. And I feel your frustration. I'm right there with you. I don't know how to fix that, but I just felt seriously like it was more important for us to understand where we were. What we do with that is a different issue altogether, no doubt.
But I would just hope that employees would understand it's difficult for me to say, okay, you're looking at a position in Carroll County where the median household income in Carroll County is $81,000 and the average house sale is somewhere in the $400,000 range. And how am I to compete with that when my average household income in the city of Hagerstown is $38,000 and the average house sale is probably in the $150,000 to $170,000 range? The numbers just, you know, unless you significantly increase the taxes in which you collect, there's no mathematical equation which allows you to compete and level that playing field otherwise. It just isn't.
If we are going to compete with the peers and peers being, or meaning places that compete with us for employees, we've got to address the services we are offering. We've got to address a lot of other areas we're spending money, and we've got to cut back in some areas. But that's basically the only thing you can do.
So I guess for us, what are our next steps? I mean, this is ugly, and this can't possibly be good for morale. I mean, it's just the reality of it. And I understand we can't fix it overnight, but we got to be closer than 20-something%.
Well, what traditionally would happen now is that we've got the report. It will take a little bit of time to get through it. Staff certainly hasn't analyzed it thoroughly. At that point, I think, I'm not speaking for Scott, but if I were in Scott's seat, I would want a series of recommendations that you bring back to mayor and council in how to move forward. The last time I went through this, the deficit in a public organization was $3.3 million. It took us 6 years to make it up. But you eat an elephant one bite at a time, and that's the way you need to approach a situation like this. Obviously, you can't reach into your pocket and fund $2 million worth of salary increases. I think it's probably impossible. You would know better than I, but so you've got to figure out how to do it in a way that is both strategic and affordable.
And also long-term, because I don't want to be, or whoever is sitting here 5-10 years from now having the same conversation. We shouldn't be 22% behind.
No, you shouldn't. And honestly, I think that number caught pretty much all of us by surprise. We knew we were off, but I don't think any of us realized how off we were.
Would it be helpful to then the studies every 3 to 5 years? Would that help?
Well, and I think that's their
Less of a
recommendation.
shock.
If you do this strategically on a regular basis and adjust for it or plan for those adjustments financially, you're a lot better off. I don't know that you'll ever, as an organization, be able to keep up with the market thoroughly. It just depends on the market. And when the market's hot, it's a lot tougher to keep up, especially in the public sector. But at least you're closer so that your adjustments don't have to be so drastic.
Anything from you?
No, I mean, I think that this isn't telling us anything we didn't know, or we didn't at least think was there. I agree with Dawn, certainly not to the extent on the MG side that it is, although, when you go through the economic issues that we went through, you knew it was gonna be a deficit. Now we've gotta find a way to catch back up, non-union and union.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Rodney, you're up. Haven Road Safe Route to School Project.
Hello. Good afternoon. This is a straightforward issue. Back in May, you approved a contract for us that would install sidewalks on Haven Road and upgrade the traffic signal on Pennsylvania Avenue and also some sidewalks on Pennsylvania Avenue. It was funded by and large 80% by Maryland Safe Routes to School. And then the local match, we decided to use Maryland state aid funds, which is money that the state allocates to us to use however we wish for transportation projects. It's not highway user revenue, it's another bag of money that we get $50,000, $60,000 a year. We set it up that way, we submitted it to the state, and earlier they told us that would be a fine way of doing it, but then they've decided that they won't give us they really haven't given us a straightforward answer whether or not that's an acceptable local match to use state aid funds. So we've been messing around with this, frankly, for about 6 months, and the contractor is telling us if we don't move forward, some of the prices are going to go up, particularly on the traffic signal equipment. So we need to move forward. So what we're suggesting is that instead of using our state aid funds that we have, that we would use general fund surplus or CIP fund balance, but, you know, basically local city money, and that we could use our state aid funds then for something else. And if we do that, then we can get started literally next week.
Agreed. Yep.
Shoot. Wow. Well, that was fast.
Good.
Of course, you know, I believe we should postpone any decision until after we talk with our state delegation more, but that's me. And I think that.
How much of this is state and how much is it federal that's putting us behind the eight ball here?
It's the federal aid people at State Highway that make this decision whether or not this is an acceptable match to
And
their
it wasn't an
money.
acceptable match
wasn't
until
one time.
August, it looked like.
And
true.
and it's not like we're losing the money, though. We're gonna
That's
be able to
true.
reprogram it for
Right.
something else.
That's right. Probably the UIP.
Is South Potomac Street gonna be shut down all winter?
No. What I have heard today was that Callis, who's building the Barbara Ingram School, needs about 2 or 3 more weeks to finish the masonry work on the front, and then they're gonna be able to pull back the fence and just take up the parking lane. So the 2 lanes of Potomac will be restored by early December.
Okay.
And then I think we'll have the parents parking back out there like they always did after the first of the year. So it's slowly getting there, yeah.
All right, thank you, Rodney.
Thanks, Rob.
Oh, you're still on?
Yes, sir.
Oh, they haven't shown up yet.
No?
I think we can go ahead, though, unless you want to.
You want to talk about the invitation to visit Basel, Germany first?
Okay.
And see if they show up here in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. Who's going to talk about this?
I can. We got a letter in the mail from the mayor of Basel, asking, or inviting us to join in a commemoration that they have, and I'm basically reading this straight off the memo, where they do a remembrance related to the devastation of the town during World War II. They're having this in February 14th and 16th of 2020. They're going to have their ceremony in Basel, and then they will also go to the Liberation Museum in the Netherlands that highlights the current significance of democracy, freedom, and human rights. And they are inviting city officials to come. They are taking care of the lodging. What we would have to come up with would be the air travel, and I'm sure there'll be some dinners and whatnot that they would take care of, but whatever other extra costs, we would take care of ourselves here. I think the last time somebody went, I think Mayor Geisberts went several years ago for a commemoration. I know they send folks over here pretty regularly for August-Toberfest. We have the exchange program between the students from Basel coming here and then ours going over there. So just something to put out to you for your interest and, what you thought about, if any of you would be available or want to go.
Mayor, I think that it would be a very positive thing for some members of the mayor and council to go. This is a very long-standing relationship, and Scott is right that we regularly, as you know, I don't have to tell you, but more for everybody's purpose, have a delegation come from over there. Now, I know Mayor Geisbert's, when he went, he made a vacation out of it, and therefore, I think he felt it was his responsibility to be responsible for the airfare. I would note, I don't know that the compensation in this council is such a great amount that it would be unreasonable to pay for the airfare. I say all that with an understanding that, for various reasons, I'm not in a position to be able to go. So I'm not trying to sell myself to go, but I would certainly strongly support other members. And when we talk about the expense, I don't think we're probably talking about nearly as much money individually as we're talking about going to MML. So, you know, I know everybody's very afraid of public perception of spending a couple $100 to send people over to Germany. But like I say, it's relatively fraction of the cost of what we spend for MML. And I think those of us that go to MML think it is a very positive thing. And I think this experience is positive for the citizens of Hagerstown. And I think the other thing it really does is cement a relationship of an exchange program with our youth. And I think it's an example to set. I mean, I remember one year we were having a meeting here and there was a tornado warning. Suddenly we all realized that we'd be setting a real bad example if we didn't stop the meeting. And we would be setting a bad example if we did not send some folks over to Basil. And I would strongly encourage any of our council members. And if the price is too much, you know, Austin would be happy to take you in his Piper Cub.
Is there
Get a
places
good
to stop
tailwind.
for fuel along the way also? Okay.
The cost for air travel that we found was between $600 and $800 round trip. So it's not, for a, you know, transatlantic flight, it's not too bad.
Yeah, that's less than 3 nights in Ocean City.
And listen, it's hard when you look at what the itinerary would be, it's hard to argue that anybody would be going over there for a vacation type of thing. And that's one of the reasons I don't think I could go. I mean, I know it's gonna be constant from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night. There's gonna be walking and traveling. I imagine Emily and Shelley would talk about Hagerstown, Indiana.
If it's anything
and
like
that's-
that, then
Well,
that's
and
what I
that's
was thinking
what,
about.
that's what I would expect it would be like, and that's the reason I just, I know that I wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, I think that's something for the council to think about and maybe put together a list of who might go. And we'll revisit it again here before, so we give them an answer before December 1st.
Right.
Sound good? Okay. All right, yeah, good. So next up, Ronnie, come on. Proposed stadium improvements for the 2020 season.
He is Tim McDougal, and he's the new president of the Suns. Welcome, Tim.
Good afternoon.
The Fifth Amendment of the lease specifies that the $35,000 in rent that the Suns pay, that the city will invest back in the stadium. It says you can do that at your absolute discretion on how you want to use that money, but basically it just says it's for upgrades. So what we've done each of the last couple years is I go talk to the Suns, get their list. We put together our list of things that we see at the stadium that require just general maintenance, above and beyond just routine things. And then we bring those to you for your input, and then, once you approve the list, then we'll start working on this and get it done before next baseball season in April 2020. So the Suns list is, I think, fairly modest, really. And you can see there in the memo, the biggest item is they want to add an additional concession area. So the facility, The building itself is something that we take care of. They would provide the equipment. They're asking us to provide the hood and the fire suppression system and everything that's associated with the grill. And then some other minor items, maintenance and different things listed on there. Our list is longer because the maintenance at the stadium is growing. As the stadium gets older, there's more and more issues there to deal with. Our number one priority is on the third base side. The bleachers that are there are from 1947, and they've never had any structural work. Last April, we did a thorough inspection of them and found places where, this picture is not really that helpful, but this is underneath where the people sit. You can stick your fingers through the metal webbing of the, so we had a welder get in there and they fixed about half of them. We'd like to finish that job this year. We fixed the worst of them last year. The shade canopies over the beer gardens, and then some other things. So when you look at all this together, it's far more than $35,000. What we are recommending are the ones that are in bold, that we attempt to get done for next year. That's my recommendation. And Tim, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to share or go over.
We just wanted to make the improvements that we could to the stadium for the fans, so when they come, they can have an enjoyable time. So that was our priority.
Ronnie, I'm assuming the wall cap masonry is an item that if not done can cause significant damage in the long run?
Well, if you look at the picture
Right.
of
Top of the outfield wall.
the outfield wall, the cap is a solid piece of block masonry, and some of them are broken or missing altogether. And I have a feeling that's allowing moisture to get down in the wall, and it may be the reason why, or part of the reason why so much of the paint is
But
peeling.
that's your answer to the question, that's what I thought.
It's not a
It's
structural
just-
issue, it's more about maintaining the wall.
Right, it's gonna cost more money in the long run if we don't do it.
Right. And it just doesn't look very good right now.
Tim, you probably don't know this, but I'm sure Travis does. How many times did the HVAC go out in the clubhouse this year?
This year, once or twice.
Because on average, it's usually 3 or 4 times.
Hey, Rod, can I ask a question about number 8, modify outfield wall for drainage? Is that, does that encompass, because every time there was a hard rain, I know I was at least down there twice last summer. Because the clubhouse was flooded. The one time, it was Travis about up to our knees, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Does that have any type, which costs money too, to, dry the carpet and fix whatever has been waterlogged? Does that number 8 go towards helping eliminate that?
I don't know if it eliminated it, but I think it would lessen it. Basically, just kind of brainstormed an idea of in that part of the outfield wall, right down the right field line, if there was the masonry wall, if a lintel or a beam was placed in the wall where the water could flow through it, then we'd have to put some sort of protection on it so people couldn't crawl through it, obviously. But the water could go through the stadium, basically. It wouldn't build up as much then and cause as much problems in the clubhouse. So that's a kind of an attempt to get the water to not be the depth that it is at times.
Okay.
We just replaced that carpeting this past season.
We replaced,
Yes.
yes. And it's been flooded twice.
And we replaced it in 14.
So like the repairs on the third base bleachers, from the photo there, that looks like a safety issue.
Yes, I would say that's
So
true.
I don't think we could not do that.
They're 60 years old, and they've never had any work done to them, so from that standpoint, it's not that much money, but I would recommend that on our list that we at least do that one.
So what if we were able to give the Suns every part of their wish list and then finish the repairs on the third base bleachers, which are the safety? So then you're at 33,000, 34,000. And then maybe being able to select, you know, to replace the groundskeeper building door for $1,000. I mean, would that be, make a better fan experience if we were able to cover all of your list?
Yes, I would definitely say so. At the top of the list there with the hood vent, we're taking a hard look at our concessions right now, and this is gonna give us the ability to widen our menu. We're also looking at trying to maybe bring in a local vendor if we possibly can. And, so whatever we can do to better the fan experience is what we're all about.
So if we like didn't replace the shade canopy and didn't replace the outfield wall cap or repair that, are they safety issues at all?
No, not safety issues. The shade canopy is at the end of its life, so it's getting threadbare, basically.
Could it last another season?
I don't know, Travis, do you know if it lasts another season?
I think the shade canopy could last another year.
Okay.
The wall cap is probably something that's gonna be substantial that might need to get done as well. Just for the fact of it not only for the paint issues, but it also has started to form a mold that forms in front of the batter's eye. So it's something that the Nationals have brought up as well. So it makes like a white mold, and obviously with the white baseball, it doesn't work out too well.
It's effervescence that comes through the brick.
Can
It
I
goes
ask
away
where
in the
these
summertime,
prices
it's
come
there.
from?
What?
Where these prices come from?
Like,
Like-
go ahead.
It's, installing a wall is $5,000.
Installing a wall in the team store for 5,000, does seem a little.
I mean, give me some drywall, I'll do it for less.
I will also power wash for $3,000.
Yes, power washing for, I mean, these,
100%.
they just seem
All day.
high to me. Do they go to bid or?
We can, or we try to do them in-house when we can too.
Yeah.
So that includes labor.
I'm sure we
and
could
everything.
build a wall in-house.
That's quite a large deck, that beer garden, to power wash that and to treat that all. We'll have guys down there for a while.
I have a question. So, we're looking at the list and I'm trying to relate that list to the letter that we received from the Suns ownership on October 17th, a couple of weeks ago, when it references, among other things, the term of a compliant stadium. And that seems to be a term that is gaining some traction in the communications that we receive, that specific term compliant, and getting to some of the discussion here. Are we putting at the top of the list those things that need the most immediate attention as it relates to the operations of the facility? Or are we putting at the top of the list those items that meet whatever this term compliant statement or stadium is intended to now, encompass? Because a good example is, I look at the last item, which is at the bottom of the list, which is replace the roof on the batting cage. It seems to me that if the directive from Major League Baseball to Minor League Baseball, as it is accentuated in this letter of October 17th, is for player safety and player development, that an item like that would be sort of at the top of Major League Baseball's list of compliance in order to protect the investment, i.e. their baseball player. I don't, I'm just trying to determine whether what we're trying to do is keep the stadium up and functioning, or we're trying to meet the compliance of Major League Baseball to protect what they believe to be their investment in the organization.
And also, to kind of piggyback on Councilman Alshire, is there an actual document that states what compliancy what requirements there are for a compliant stadium?
When's the last time MLB came through?
2 or 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
So you
I
probably
it.
have that information.
I have that document.
Okay.
Yeah,
We had to upgrade the field lights and
yeah.
Yeah,
do a bunch of
yeah,
things.
worrying about a batter's cage to be compliant is like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping chest wound and think you're gonna stop the bleeding. I mean, municipal stadium, when MLB came through in 2013, the only thing compliant was the size of the lockers in the locker room. That was it, and that was 2013. And Major League Baseball is no different than government or anybody else. Their regulations change on a constant basis, just like everybody else's does. So, like I said, I understand what Kristen's saying, but I'm thinking, you know, we got a choice to either enhance the fan attendance and their experience, or, you know, try to put a Band-Aid on sucking chip.
Mayor, I'd recommend we go with staff's recommendation, boldface.
Anybody else?
I think I mean, I definitely see under the ones suggested by the engineering staff, number 1 and number 3, those are, you've gotta do those.
And then be able to maybe power wash and install a cheaper wall or something.
Some of the wall costs, I think there's receptacles and
Right.
different things in there.
Oh, so the bold up here, 21.
So the bowl, are you guys okay with the bowl? Tim?
Yeah.
Everybody else okay with the bowl?
You are okay with the bolded items?
I mean, you bring up a very good point, and the 6 that we listed, however, to your point, 2 below definitely need to be done, so.
Right.
Yeah, if the shade canopy can last another season, then we could do 1 and 3 under B there, the city's recommendations, and then that would free up some.
Why don't we get a real number on installing the wall in the team store?
I just
Yeah.
think that the list that you have given us, you know, this wish list isn't, you know, extensive. It's, you know, it's not much of the
I know a
allocation of
guy.
35,000, so, what did you say?
I'm saying.
Oh,
I know a guy who can
Yeah.
install a wall.
I mean, that's just my thoughts, is, you know, to be able to grant all of that and get a less expensive quote on the wall, to maybe do 1 and 3.
Well, just keep in mind, the whole quote is an in-house quote. Right, Ronnie, or
Yeah.
not? Yeah, I mean, if you're
Oh, we're not gonna
thinking,
get it any
if you're
less
thinking that we're gonna
expensive.
get it cheaper, you know, I don't build walls, but I have no doubt that if our staff is saying in-house with the electrical receptacles and everything, that it's gonna cost that kind of money, I think you're probably kidding yourself if you think it's gonna get done a lot cheaper.
Okay.
Okay.
So we can scratch the shade canopy and use that $4,000.
To do the beer garden.
Yeah,
Because that's
Yeah.
the next priority for them, on number
Yes.
5.
and maybe they can hang some blankets up in the team store.
I think that would be a fair trade, is instead of B3, do A5. It's 34,000, 35,000. We always have other
Yeah.
costs.
Is that okay, Tim?
Yes.
Does that?
Yeah, that's a great recommendation.
So I'm okay with this list, and I know this is a long-standing contract that you pay 35,000, we put $35,000 back into it, so that's all good with me. But then I hear the stuff about the compliance in the stadium and like need for new HVAC for the clubhouse and anything. Does any of this fall on the Suns? You know, we just spent $300,000 to build, the potential to build a $50 million stadium, and you guys.
Actually, we didn't spend any money.
Okay, well, Maryland state taxpayers just spent $300,000 for us to inquire about building a new stadium, which is clearly needed by looking at these pictures. But does any of this ever fall on the Suns? I mean, an HVAC in the clubhouse would be
Well,
detrimental to their players. You think they would want to invest in?
Well, we're the owner of that facility, and as the landlord, that actually falls on the landlord's responsibility, not the team.
Yeah. I just struggle with that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I think if we didn't fund it, they'd have to decide if they're going to. That's how that would probably
And
work.
$35,000 doesn't go very far when you need,
When it's in such disrepair.
That's my point, yes, you're right. It seems like our list grows each year.
Okay, so, thank you very much.
All right.
Doesn't fix the jacuzzi in Travis's office, so.
Yeah. Well, that only happens, the jacuzzi only happens when it floods. All right, city administrator. Well, I mean, we want, yeah, the city administrator.
Couple things, Mayor. This weekend, November 9th, rain or shine, 10 to 2 at the municipal stadium parking lot is an electronics, recycling and document shredding service.
Saturday?
This is Saturday, November 9th. It'll go 10 to 2 or until the trucks are filled. I think the trucks filled before 2 o'clock last year, didn't they, Rodney? It was close. Bring your electronics down and go on www.hagerstownmd.org to see the list of acceptable items, unacceptable items, residential items only, no commercial bulk dumping down there, and that's for city residents only, and they do check to make sure you're a city resident, so don't think you can get by with that, because they check it very diligently. Also, Monday, Veterans Day, city offices are closed. That's all from me.
So we're off.
Shelley?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Luke?
Just, I'm assuming, Mayor, will you be getting the wreaths?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to stay for the speech Monday.
Well, you know,
I'm actually gonna be leaving work to come down, and I have to go back to work, so.
Understood.
We'll do the.
And then we can
wreath
split
lighting.
the others up then.
Yep.
That's fine. That's all I have, thank you.
Austin? Kristen? Emma? Cool. All right. I don't have anything tonight. Thank you very much.
With Mayor Bob Brucci, I'm Wes Decker. Councilman Austin Heffernan will be joining me shortly. But Mayor, I want to get your thoughts following the council meeting today, just an opportunity for you to kind of weigh in on some of the things that were discussed. You don't always necessarily get that opportunity here. So first off, I think we want to talk about that wage study a little bit. And what's your main takeaway from the results that have come back from that?
Well, it's no shock that we are behind. And the last wage study was 2006. So this wage study revealed what everybody feared, that we were upwards of 18% behind where we should be. When you're looking at our peer municipalities and other counties. We have to try to figure out a way to make us competitive, especially when it comes to police. We have to be competitive in the recruitment pay and the retainment pay. We want to make sure that the people that we recruit, and I've said it time and again, are the cream of the crop. And we want to make sure that we can keep them once we get them. So it's important that we come up with a solution to do that. And I feel secure that we will. And then hopefully we'll be up to a staffing level that is suitable for our citizens.
What was the most encouraging thing that you heard from that? I mean, there has to be some silver lining in the whole study.
Yeah, there was. I mean, we're, we know that we're, our median people in the pay scale who have been here 10, 12, 13 years, we have a lot. We're 63%, which I believe is probably higher than any place around us. Because when people get employed by the city and they do a good job and they get their step increases and they stay, which is what we want. We want longevity out of employees. We don't want to have to keep retaining and retraining employees. So the good thing is that we have good retainment when it comes, especially to non-union personnel who work in the city.
The last item that we heard about on the agenda today was improvements to Municipal Stadium, and talking about the Hagerstown Suns wish list and then the recommendations from city staff as it relates to that. And I think the one thing that comes to my mind is, how much more money can we put into a stadium that is nearly 90 years old now?
Well, it actually is 90. They played their 90th season this year.
Built in 1930, right?
Right, but that was the first season, so they played their 90th season this year. We talked about the bleachers. Bleachers were built in 1947. They're 72 years old. Those are the kind of things. The conversation that we had at the table revolved around, being compliant to Major League Baseball. And, when I was at the Suns in 2013 and Major League Baseball came through, and I stated that this evening, that the only thing that we were compliant on back then, 6 years ago, was the size of the lockers. And that was it.
That's crazy.
Lighting, seating, field quality, none of that matched to what MLB feels that we need to be compliant on. So, we're gonna have to continue to piecemeal this facility together as long as we can, and until we can build a compliant facility that we can do multiple things in besides just baseball. And, that's what we need to do. And to be able to do that without using local taxpayer dollars is essential. And I believe we can manage that.
Yeah, and I think, as Rodney said, the list keeps getting longer for maintenance to an older park like that. Speaking of other items on the agenda, I guess the one involving Haven Road and the safe routes to school, I know you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm going to touch on that real quick because tonight they decided that we could actually use a pot of money from the state highway, $125,000 to be the matching to the federal grant that we got for safe routes to school, and up through August, it was okay to use those funds, and now all of a sudden it's not. So I want to, instead of delving into our reserves for 125,000 of taxpayer dollars, I'd like to find out from our delegation tomorrow during a delegation meeting if there's any help that they could give us before we take that route, and let's see what they can do. And I realize we're in a time crunch. I understand that. But we aren't going to vote on this subject until the 26th. So we have time to get some kind of indication from somebody that we may still, yes, be able to use those matching grant monies as our match to the federal grant. So.
And that's something that will be addressed tomorrow then?
It's something I'll be bringing up at our delegation meeting, yes.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Mayor, appreciate it.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it.
As I mentioned, Councilman Austin Heffernan will join me now, and we'll delve into his thoughts on the meeting. And we'll start with that wage study, Austin. And as an elected member of the council, you know, when you hear those figures come back the way they did, and as the mayor said, probably not a tremendous surprise to anyone, but then when you see the numbers and they're that far off, what's your reaction to that?
We all knew that the numbers were going to be that way, but we didn't know the magnitude. And what it tells me is that we need to do some serious soul searching about what we're going to do. I mean, a lot of the things that came up tonight were about the disparity between our peers and ourselves in terms of the median income, the housing prices, the property tax, what the property taxes can bear. So we've got to really evaluate what services, goods and services we do offer as a city, and we've got to get competitive. Our police, our fire, we've got to be competitive. Our other non-union positions, we don't want to be out, constantly trying to turn over employees or anything, and look for, having to constantly recruit people. And we want people that will stay here long-term, career-wise. So we've got to figure out how to hit that those magic numbers there to be competitive in the area. And I think the only way we're going to do it is look very, very closely at other areas where we're spending money and dial some things back.
And how do you define that word competitive when we look at how far it's going to take from a money standpoint to get to where we need to be? How do you look at that? How do you assess that?
Well, I mean, to be competitive, we're basically just talking about it's a situation we have to deal with. We've got a situation where we do not have the property tax basis that these peer cities around us have. And we've got to figure out a way to deal with it. We've got to figure out how to cut expenses in some areas to be able to pay people what is a competitive wage.
Is that a source of frustration a little bit with a survey or a study like this and the way that, the evaluations come back?
Not really. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it just, the fact is that we've got a lower income, let's say, in this city that some of our peer cities do.
Yeah, I mean, that's just reality.
And there's nothing you can do about that. But by the same token, you can't expect your police officers and your fire professionals and your staff people, other union positions or non-union positions to show up at work every day and not kind of look at the want ads and see what's going on, 20 miles away. It's human nature. Everybody wants to do the best thing they can for their families. So we've got to provide people the competitive pay and benefits that will make them happy doing their job here.
Is this a real difficult situation from the standpoint of trying to walk the line? Because you're talking about city employees on one hand, you're talking about those who, you're representing as those who are the taxpayers. How difficult is that?
It's very difficult because, and the thing I keep hearing from the taxpayers out there is they're very frustrated with a lot of the petty crimes that are going on. They're very frustrated with a lot of the day in, day out things that they see going wrong. And they want a fully funded police department. They want a fully funded fire department. They want those services. We've got to basically figure out a prioritization. You know, where do we prioritize getting the salaries up to the levels we need to be? Are there some services we're offering that we don't need to offer anymore? That may be true too. I think this budget session is going to be very telling. We're going to have to look very, very closely at what we're doing and where we're spending money, and knowing that we've got this void to fill, and we have to fill it. There's no question. We're not going to kick this down the can down the road on the salary issue. It can't happen. We have to address it.
Going to take a little more creativity
Yeah.
than perhaps most recently. The other item I wanted to touch on, I asked the mayor about, was the improvements to Municipal Stadium. And I think that's an interesting one, again, just because of the age of the stadium. And obviously, we have a study in place right now, potentially for another outdoor sports facility, whatever you want to call that. But in the meantime, you know, this deal with the Suns, the $35,000, it doesn't seem terribly unreasonable. But when you look at the list of things, again, that staff is coming back with and saying, you know, they're longer than the wish list that the Hagerstown Suns has, that has to be a little bit of a concern.
Very much so. And I think there's, you know, there are so many things that need to be done to that stadium from the flooding standpoint. One of the suggestions was try to do something with drainage to stop the wall from backing water up, let water flow through it. That's creating havoc on the dugouts and on the structures there. There's so much that needs to be done. A lot of it is, and it was brought up, one council member brought it up tonight, you know, from a leaseholder perspective, yes, you know, the city owns the stadium, and this is a contractual thing. We need to look at our contract too, next time we negotiate that. But I think when you look at the things that are profit motivated, that are bringing additional revenue in for the tenant. Some of the things like an additional snack bar and that kind of thing. Maybe that's not really an improvement. You know, the spirit of that thing was that the $35,000 would be turned around into improvements. Now, improvements I can see being drainage. I can see improvements being keep the wall from falling down, keep the stadium seats, the benches from collapsing that are so old. Maybe we need to kind of reevaluate that. You know, if the tenant is there to make money, maybe the things that are going to increase their revenue should be their responsibility. I don't know. We may need to look at that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense without a doubt. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, you know, can you take your family there and have an enjoyable time? And I think that's one of the things that, you know, the Suns representation brought up tonight was, you know, we want to be able to enhance that experience. And I think there is charm in that old ballpark, but it seems to be losing that steam a little bit year by year as it gets older. So I think you make a lot of fair points there.
There's the thing that was running through my mind, you know, there's a very large contingent of people in the city that love the old stadium. They want the old stadium to stay there. They would love to see a better experience to take their family to. But we haven't done any fundraisers. I mean, you know, maybe those folks would like to get together, and the Suns could spearhead something to get folks together to raise funds, like we raise funds for the museum, like we raise funds for the theater, with benefits and programs and everything else. You know, maybe that's let the people that are really driving the benefit and enjoying the stadium participate in that. I think, you know, that may be something that we have to look at.
I think, you know, a lot of good points made here tonight, and I think that's, you know, what we intend to do with this council wrap segment. We hope to be doing this after some more meetings. Austin, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks.
Well, that's it for this edition of Council Wrap. Thanks to Mayor Brucci and Councilman Heffernan. Thanks to you for watching. We'll see you next time for Council Wrap.